Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. I'm your host Wendy Corner and this podcast is for you if you are an entrepreneur. Yes, page, stage, linked together for an entrepreneur. Let me explain why. You may have a business book out. You may have a chapter in a contributory book. You may have a blog. But if you're an entrepreneur, I can guarantee you're on socials, aren't you? And what's that if it's not published work? Haha, check that box. You are an author. What about the stage bit? Well, I get a lot of business people coming to me going, oh, I can't do this public speaking thing. It's just... And they get all anxious about it. And I go, well, okay, what's your definition of public speaking? Well, on a stage and microphone and doing the rah 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 thing. And you go, no, doesn't have to be. In fact, if that's not you, then don't. Who are you thinking of? Oh, Tony Robbins? You know, he does him, you do you. My point on that front is you go to the stage that you feel comfortable with, and that may not be a stage in the traditional form of it. Put it this way, if you can have a one-on-one conversation with somebody, you can do a podcast. This is a one-on-one conversation, isn't it? I'm talking to you. Now, there are a few other people listening in as well, but that's fine. If you can do a one-on-one conversation, you can do a podcast. And yes, that is a stage. Check. You have networking meetings that you go to. Those are stages. You could maybe go to a virtual stage and present at a summit. And then, yes, ultimately, if you want to, and that's where your audience sits, you can go to the raised platform with the microphone. So why am I giving you this long preamble? Well, you'll have noticed that today I'm flying solo. You have a unique message as an entrepreneur. You have a solution that you bring to the world. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in business. Yes or yes? And it got me thinking, well, not many people actually know what I do. I'm very good about sharing other people's books, but not so much myself. Time to walk your talk, Wendy. So this episode is about me, giving you the opportunity to get to know me a bit better. So books. Okay, the 4 questions that I ask all of my guests are, what prompted you to start writing? Tell us about your speaking journey. What are you working on at the moment? And how do you embody your words when you take them from page to stage? Now, some of my guests are in the aspirational moment, that the stage is where they're aiming for. They don't feel comfortable in that place yet. It's certainly not familiar to them. So that's where that last one can be a little fluid. Let me share with you my 4 answers and give you a bit more of an idea about who I am, whether you can trust me. So, what prompted me to start writing? Well, I'm going to backtrack a bit because you may or may not know that my background, I was employed for almost 30 years as a speech pathologist in England, Scotland, and Australia. So I've worked in 3 different countries. And yes, they are 3 different countries. England and Scotland have a different health system. Maybe the disunited kingdom, but they are structured differently. Just saying. Okay, so that 3 different countries, I was employed in by 3 different employers. And then I became an entrepreneur. Now that wasn't intended because I thought I was going to be a speechy for the rest of my life. But circumstances pushed me out into being an entrepreneur. So the second chapter, contributory chapter I have, is the Unintentional Entrepreneur. And that's the story of how I left the corporate sphere and came into being an entrepreneur. Why is that important? Well, my background in speech pathology, this is a goodie. What prompted me to be a speechy in the first place? Well, I'm going to take you back to aged 2. I had to go into hospital to have an operation on my finger. Back in the 60s, parents were not allowed to stay in hospital with their children. That meant I was alone. My parents were not allowed to come in. And the little 2-year-old at the time decided that my voice didn't matter because I was yelling and screaming for my mum and she couldn't come to me. And I know as an adult, she couldn't come to me, not that she didn't want to, but that 2-year-old decided my voice doesn't matter. Now, that memory, that little internal script, as I call it, was buried deep in my subconscious for over 50 years before that memory came to mind, ready to be processed. But in that time, that internal script was running the show. It influenced my choice of profession. My voice doesn't matter, but everybody else's does. Let's make sure that everyone else's voice is heard and get paid for it as a speech pathologist. Good one. Interesting thought process, don't you think? From a subconscious level. I was not aware of that. I was still I was promoting other people's voices to get heard. I reckon I worked with about 5,000 clients in my time. So add to that the ecosystems around them, because I worked with adults with intellectual disability and or autism. And that was my main focus for pretty much 20 plus years of my professional life. Why am I telling you that? Those internal scripts matter. The stories we tell ourselves influence where we go in life. They influence our experience of life. And that's something I'm very keen on working with people to look at those internal scripts. Because if you keep telling yourself, I'm shy, I'm an introvert, I'm not a speaker, I'm an author, I'm a business person, I'm not a speaker, I'm shy, I'm an introvert. Public speaking is for people who can do the rah, rah, rah. Can you see how that's actually going to be holding you back? So this internal scripts, as I call them, writing, words, your words have power. Don't they just? The power of what you're saying in here is as important, if not more important, than what you have on the page and what you have when you're speaking out to other people in whatever stage that looks like. So that's the focus of my work. Now I work with authors. I also work with people, entrepreneurs who haven't quite got to the author bit yet. They've been promising themselves for eons that they're going to write a book. And this time of year rolls around and people set their intentions, they set their resolutions, they set their goals, call them what you will. And being an author, getting that business book written. Sometimes it's nonfiction, sometimes it's poetry, but primarily I work with business authors. And we go from the promise to myself to the page. It's a 4-week program to get people to go, there's a mastermind and an accountability element to it. And it's capped with 4 people. So it's a small group for 4 weeks to get 4 bits of work done. So if as you're watching this, you can resonate with the, yep, I haven't written that book yet. Because let's face it, life gets in the way. Business gets busy and you focus on doing the do rather than telling people what you do and being able to share it. So that's one of the things I wanted to share with you today, from promise to page. And then we can do the, from page to stage. That's where you start sharing your message. And if, as you've been telling yourself, I'm shy, I'm an introvert, I can't do all this public speaking thing, podcasting is your way in. You can have a one-on-one conversation with somebody. You can do a podcast. And I give you the opportunity for a safe space to try it out. That's where that comes in. We give you some cues, clues. And if you want to work and maximize those opportunities, then we can do some work with that as well, so that you get rebooked, referred, because podcasters do actually talk to each other. We refer within a circle. If somebody's had a really good guest, they tell the world. Equally, if somebody's had a really bad guest, then your reputation goes before you. So I'd like you to be remembered for all the right reasons. So rebooked, referred, and remembered. That's the work that I do with From Page to Stage as well. So getting back to what prompted me to start writing, the first book, I'll admit, was a gift. I was offered the opportunity of contributing to a book, and I had no intention of being an author. That wasn't for me. Hello, internal script. But when somebody gave me the opportunity because they couldn't fulfill on the contract, I took it, I ran with it. Bestseller #1. The second contributory book I curated, and that was the Mad book. And that was coming from the realization that an awful lot of authors, people wanted to get their message out there, and then let's get them onto stages. And that's where From Page to Stage was born. International bestseller #2, Mad book, Making a Difference, Ways to Magnify Abundance, Vitality, and Freedom. Third, those two came out in 23. 24, I was privileged to contribute to a book that had a foreword by Bob Proctor, the late, transcribed from an interview, and also his son, Brian. And that was international bestseller #3, which came out in December 24. Blue Business Life and Universe, Volume 13, The Law of Attraction. So those are the 3 ones that I have contributed to. This year, 2025, it started life as a solo book, but because I've been contributing to this Promise to Page group that I've been running recently, it's now morphed because of the input from these other people. That's where the mastermind bit comes in. It's very powerful. And now it's morphed into 4 books that will be coming out this year. Small, because as Dave Clare, who's a previous guest on this podcast, if you haven't checked him out, go have a look at the list. His benchmark is having a book that you can pick up on one side of a continental flight, read it, no more than 3 hours or so, and put it down by the time, or hand it on to somebody when you get to the other side. 3 hours is a good read, a good solid read, particularly if you can entice and keep people's attention. So that's the aim of the 4 books that are coming out later this year. Under the working umbrella title and the series of Letting Go, Living Lighter. If you want to know more about that, I'm happy to share later in the year, but it's about my life with 20 kilos. And if you haven't been keeping up with me, 20 kilos or 44 pounds for those of you in North America is the weight limit that I have on my luggage as I'm traveling. Some airlines have considerably more, great. But the airlines around Asia and within Australia, that is the 20 kilo rule, unless you want to buy extra. So that's where the 20 kilos life of letting go has come from. That's what prompted me to start writing. My speaking journey, well, you can gather as a speech pathologist, I had to do a lot of speaking. I had a lot of training that I worked with carers to do. Putting me on stage, that was a bit of a difficult one because I was still promoting other people, even as a speaker coach. And yes, I was speaker coach at TEDx University of Western Australia for a few years. But I still wasn't putting myself forward. So when I'm talking about these internal scripts, I'm living it. It's not theory for me, it's actual lived experience. Last year I spoke at Cambridge University. That was a biggie for me. I used to live up the road from there. Studying at Cambridge University was the pinnacle of all the girls that I went to school with. And yes, it was an all-girls school. But I had never thought I would speak there. So putting yourself forward, actually getting onto stages. Now, you may not consider myself shy or an introvert. I'm actually an ambivert. I'm somebody who can handle being in amongst people. I don't do rah-rah, that's not my style. I am British after all. But I also need alone time. I need time to recharge on my own as well as with people. So I'm one of those ambiverts. My energy gets replaced very often at home on my own, all peopled out, as I call it. So I am living what I'm talking about. That's what prompted me to start writing. I was given the gift, literally, and I've carried on. My speaker journey, I've just shared with you. Thirdly, and yes, there is a TEDx on the horizon. I haven't actually signed up yet. Thirdly, what am I working on? I've told you the Living Lighter, Letting Go, Living Lighter series. First one is due out on the 6th of June, which is about the 20 kilos physical letting go. And I've got one on the 3rd of August. Oh no, hang on. There's one in July, which is about the mental baggage, the letting go of that one. Then I've got one on the 3rd of August, which is Fear or Faith, which is looking at the spiritual side of things. And the last one at the moment in the series is looking at relationships, and that will be coming out on the 2nd of September. So there you go. I put it out there. It's now witnessed that those are the dates I'm working towards. And yes, there will be podcast appearances ahead of those. So this is part of my marketing strategy, not only my own podcast, but also getting onto other people's podcasts. Do you want to know how to do that? Get hold of me. And then how do I embody my words as I take them from page to stage? I'm living it. It's lived experience. When you show up authentically on any stage, and by stage it can be simply opening the front door and talking to somebody. If you live alone, if you have family, talking to them. You show up authentically. That's a stage, because you are transferring your thought process to the other person. Hopefully successfully. Not always though, let's face it. It's where the misunderstanding come in. My point is, every time you open your mouth with intention, it's a stage. Let that sink in for a minute. Every time you open your mouth with intention, you have a message to share, you have something to say to somebody. It's a stage. Can you see now that you are actually quite proficient at the stage, at the public speaking? Let's flip that script, shall we? Okay. That's how I embody my words when I take them from page to stage. You see the whole me, real and raw. Trust this has been helpful to you. Final thoughts as we wind up. Do let me know what your biggest takeaways have been. For me, it has been the fact that I am living what I talk about. These internal scripts are so powerful. They carry as much weight as anything you say out loud, because what you say out loud comes as a result of what you're doing in here. Here and here. So heart and head. Because if there's a disconnect between heart and head, it will show, literally, it will show in your voice. Ooh. Did you know that? That's the speech pathologist in me coming out. So I would love to know what your biggest takeaways from this were. If you're in the process of getting that book down, promise to page. If you've got your book and you want to promote it, page to stage. Let 2025 be the year that your words have power both in here and out there. For now, bye from me.